The National Opinion Research Center, originally in Denver, but subsequently moved to the University of Chicago, focused primarily on working as a contractor for national surveys on behalf of other organizations. It blended the public opinion world of the pollsters with more academic interests in sample design and questionnaire construction. Methodological studies were a staple of NORC during this period. By the early 1960s, NORC had conducted field work for many of the most influential studies, including Almond and Verba's pioneering five-nation comparative study published as The Civic Culture in 1963, and very important work on occupational prestige by North and Hatt. But lacking an internal staff of scholars and members of a faculty, NORC's work was more commonly identified with their clients than with NORC itself. Still, NORC continues to exist today as one of the several major survey research centers in the country. The Survey Research Center in 1946. The Division of Program Surveys was shutting down at the end of the war, so Lec4pt, Kish, and their colleagues needed a new home. Lec4pt set out to find one. They had to settle for an unusual arrangement in Ann Arbor, Michigan. In effect, the University of Michigan agreed to let Lec4pt establish the Survey Research Center, but the university would provide no financial support. Rather, the SRC had to be entirely self-supporting through grants and contracts. Furthermore, while SRC staff were allowed to teach courses, these would be on one-year appointments, explicitly without tenure or a track to tenure. And the university could terminate this experimental relationship at any time. There was, however, one unusual feature to the relationship that, in the long run, was crucial to the institutional success of SRC. Michigan, since it was providing no resources, agreed to let the SRC keep the overhead from the grants it received. Now, overhead from grants often run as much as 50% of the total grant amount, so we're talking about a substantial amount of money. This virtually unique arrangement allowed the SRC to invest substantially in itself and its infrastructure as grants flowed in. That money from overhead, for example, allowed staff to be kept on and paid in between grants and contracts. That was critical for establishing and maintaining the research organization. In 1949, SRC became the largest center within the new Institute for Social Research, which included the Center for Group Dynamics and later Economic and Political Behavior Centers. I'll usually refer to the SRC, but at other times to ISR. As a feisty startup, Lec4pt and colleagues hustled to find grants and contract support for the new SRC. This was enormously helped by their ability to import, essentially complete, the intellectual property of the Division of Program Surveys, national sampling frame, and the bulk of the field staff as well. As the government programs were shutting down or refocusing, these incredibly valuable elements were allowed to follow the staff that created them in the 1940s. What's more, Lec4pt and colleagues' connections to government research from the war years also provided them with potential clients who provided the vast majority of funding in the early years of the Survey Research Center. Thus, the SRC arrived at Michigan in 1946 and 47 with a sampling frame and a field staff, so it was quickly able to collect data for contracts and grants. In the first year, SRC did almost $250,000 in business and exceeded $350,000 by 1949. After that, revenues grew rapidly, and because the arrangement with Michigan allowed the SRC to keep its overhead, the SRC was able to rapidly expand its capacity. For perspective, though, the university's entire Department of Sociology had a budget far less than $350,000. So while the folks at SRC may have thought they were working on a shoestring, by comparison with many university departments, they had a budget that was truly enormous, and a reach of research that was far beyond what any academic department was able to contemplate at the time. SRC conducted a number of studies in the early days, but they made one unique contribution to survey research methods in the area of political polling. In 1948, desperate for funds of any kind, the SRC accepted a contract with the Chicago Council on Foreign Relations to conduct a national survey of attitudes on a variety of international issues. As part of the questionnaire, more or less as an afterthought, the researchers included a question on how the respondent planned to vote. The survey was completed in October 1948. It showed Truman to be the likely winner.